Hello 1L. We're going to talk about place value and rules for rounding today. So today's learning goal, I can successfully identify place value and apply the rules for rounding whole numbers. So we're not talking about decimals in this one. We'll do decimals in the next video. So we're just going to talk about rules for rounding whole numbers. So I've given you this big whopping number here. It starts in, well, take a look at this. This 7 is in the 100 millions. So if I were going to say this this number, we would say 793,593,686. So these three digits here, they talk about millions. These three digits here talk about thousands. And these three digits here talk about hundreds. Now we could go even further. Out here there would be billions and then trillions if we keep going that way, but I think we'll stop at the millions. Okay. So let's take a look at them. We start with the ones column. We go 1, 10, 100, and then thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and then millions, 10 millions, 100 millions, and each of these three groups goes that way. We get a new name here. Okay, so we get a new name here for thousands and a new name here for millions. And then there will be a new name here for billions, but we're not going to go into that. And then after you do that, then it just goes 10, 100. And once you get to the next one, then it gets a new name. Okay, so ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions, 100 millions. Now take a look at the rounding roller coaster here. This says that right at the top, the split occurs between 4 and 5. Any number bigger than 5 rolls down to the bigger numbers. Any number less than 5 rolls backwards to the smaller numbers. So that's what this says. 4 or less stays the same. 5 or more goes higher. Okay, so it rolls to the big numbers, rolls to the smaller numbers. So let's take a look. Here's the steps that we're going to go through. So I'm just going to pull this up so that we can actually see. And we're going to go follow these step by step for these things here. This says step 1, underline the number you are rounding to. So we're looking at this one here. This says to the nearest 10. So which one are we rounding to? This is the tens column. Remember? Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. So this is the tens column. So now what we're going to do is we're going to imagine like a line in here. And on the right hand side of the line is the number we look at to see what our roller coaster is going to do. So this 2 is either going to stay a 2 or it's going to move to a 3. And since this number here is less than 5, it's going to stay a 2, so it stays the same. So we just write this number out, 3, 7, 5, 2, and then anything that comes after the number we're rounding is a 0. So that 1 gets changed to a 0. Now we're going to do that again. I'm going to erase the little thing that I put there, and we're going to talk about it rounding to the nearest 100. So here's the 100 column. The third one over is the 100. Look back up at this thing if you need to. Okay, and now I'm going to put a little line there because it's that line that's the top of the rounding roller coaster. It tells us this number is going to tell us whether this 5 gets pushed to a 6 or whether it stays a 5. And since this 2 is less than 5, this 5 doesn't get pushed anywhere. We got to have big numbers here to push these ones. So we're going to write down 3, 7, 5 doesn't get changed, and then the 2 numbers after it get changed to a 0. Okay, now I'm going to take my eraser again, and we're going to do that again. I'm going to underline, this one says to the 1,000th column. So if I take the 1,000, that's this one here, and I think of this line here, now this 1,000 is either going to stay a 7 or it's going to get pushed to an 8. Is the next number big enough to push it? It's a 5. Remember 5? If we take a look at the rounding roller coaster, 5 is going to push it on down to the bigger numbers. So yes, it is big enough to push it to an 8. So instead of writing 3, 7, I'm going to write 3, 8. And then the rest of them are zeros. And there's 3 of them. Don't put too many zeros. Don't put another 0. That makes it a much bigger number. So just whatever was left after this line that we've put gets turned into a 0. Now I'm going to erase that. And it says to the nearest 10,000. So the nearest 10,000 is this one here. And so we're going to draw that line. And again, is this going to stay at 3, or is the next number big enough to bump it to a 4? Well, the next number is a 7. That's bigger than 5. So it's going to bump that to a 4. So we're going to write down a 4. And then how many zeros do I need? 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. Now this next one's a little bit tricky because it says it wants it to the nearest 100,000. And if we take a look at this, there is no 100,000 digit. There's nothing there. And since this 3 isn't big enough to say that this has 100,000, like this would have to be bigger than 5 in order for this to be close to 100,000. The nearest 100,000, there's no 100,000s. It's not close to that. It's closer to 0 than it is to the 100,000s. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, I want you to pause this video. I'm going to pause it too. And when I come back, all of these answers are going to be here. So I want you to pause the video and see if you can fill in the rest of these numbers. And then I'm going to come right back and you'll see the answers and you can check your answers. So here we go. We're going to pause it. Did you pause me? Come on, pause me. And we're back. And here we go. I hope you put me on pause and you filled it in. I just want to mention one little thing before I send you on to your worksheet, and that is that, take a look here. When we say to the nearest 10, 10 has 1 0, and so do all of these answers. To the nearest 100, 100 has 2 zeros, and so do all of these answers. To the nearest 1,000, 1,000 has 3 zeros, and so do all of these answers. And nearest 10,000, 10,000 has 4 zeros, and so do all of these answers. And lastly, to the nearest 100,000, other than the first one, which is weird, 100,000 has 5 zeros, and so do these answers. So your answers, whatever they're nearest to, those numbers, they have to have that many zeros in them. Okay, and now it's time for the worksheet.